at the end of the day, no one wants to be shelfware. And unfortunately, for that first year, you oftentimes don't know if you are or not until it's renewal time. And the way you get ahead of that is you check usage. You got to talk to your customers. Founders, you got to talk to your customers and make sure that they're getting a value exchange. Welcome back to another episode of the Revenue Reimagined podcast. Local, in person, in Tampa. You wouldn't guess it because Dale has that really pretty flower background behind him. We won't even talk about the background behind me. But this is a super special episode. You are in for a treat. Our special guest this episode is none other than Dale and Adam. We are celebrating the 1 year anniversary of Revenue Reimagined, the lessons learned, how the process has evolved, just kind of what we're seeing overall in the market. So I have no one to welcome to the show today other than Dale. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And it's been great to kind of reflect back on the past year and try to figure out the things like the good, bad, and the ugly, right? So there was like some really highlighted things, some things that were like challenges, and then where we need to like kind of progress even the organization, how we're collaborating with clients, and how we can make even more exponential growth for our clients in the end of 2024 into 2025. And one of the things that we've been working really hard on is a really solidified framework over the last 12 months on what we've seen, the challenges that people have been having. And so we built out a framework called the go-to-market gap. And so today, one of the things love to talk to you guys about is what the gap looks like, what the go-to-market gap, why people are struggling in that go-to-market gap, and how you as founders, CEO, revenue leaders can all take some of these learnings and implement them like tomorrow, like just start doing some of the stuff tomorrow, with frameworks that we potentially have, or just by yourself, and then having conversations with us on how we can potentially help out. So that's kind of where I wanted to pass it back over.
I love it. Let's get into it. So we've been around for just over a year. By my count, I think roughly 15-ish engagements through the course of that year. All of them have learning experiences, right? Some of them were short engagements that were meant to be short engagements that we rolled in, rolled out, did what we need to do. Others stuck around for 12 months and then some. And some have just started. And I think the one consistent thing that I personally have seen in all the clients I spoke to initially is when we initially get engaged, when we have that initial first conversation, everyone just wants to jump into some form of repeatability. Come in here, let's hire people and just make it work, Dale. Just make it work, Adam. And we took a fundamental step back and said, how do we explain in a way that everyone will understand that you can't just go in and have repeatability? So we coined this go-to-market gap. And what is that? And then, Dale, I'd love it if you kind of break these down a little bit. But the go-to-market gap is very simple, right? You can't go from all the way over here to all the way over here without bridging what's in the middle. You can't just go from Florida to California without going through every other state. So step one is stabilization. Step two is foundation. Step three is repeatability. And that step four is ultimately scalability. Gold star, I remembered that and I didn't even have to look anywhere. But most people don't want to start with stabilization and most people don't know what stabilization is. So I think it's really important that we spend some time on that topic as to not just what is stabilization, but why is that so important? And why can't you just start with a foundation or with repeatability? What the hell do you have to stabilize?
Yeah, and I think this is a great jumping off point because it was a aha moment for us as an organization because we want to go in and help customers right away, like close business, get stuff through the pipeline, realize like how do we close deals faster? And what we realized through this process was things were broken just in the fundamentals of the go-to-market strategy. Like they're just fundamental processes. So for example, What was the ideal customer profile? That work could have been done 2 or 3 years ago. However, it's never been updated. The market shifted. Potentially something like COVID happened where it was really good at one point, and now you're on the other side of COVID, and the market shifting and changing. And so people weren't really looking at things like ideal customer profile, buying persona, value proposition to those buying personas and ideal customer profiles. Some people were just combining ICP and customer profiles together, and buying personas, and it became this mess. And trying to do the same thing they did 12, 24 months ago into today, it just wasn't working anymore. So you had to get back to the foundation, the fundamental level of these basics that you're going through. So you can't just go start closing deals. You kind of got to go back up and stabilize your initial conversation.
But how many folks do we talk to where we're talking about ICP or buyer persona or value prop, and we look at a document and it hasn't been touched since the very first
Yeah,
iteration? Listen,
yeah,
there's only one thing that doesn't really change, and that's your origin story. And even then, you probably want to tweak the verbiage a little bit, but your origin story is your origin story. But your value prop, your buyer personas, your ICP, like when you're looking at a document from 2021, you can't expect to see success if you're still training your team on 2021 documents.
yep, exactly. And so that stabilization period, that stabilization phase, it's a relook at the ICPs, the buying personas. It's a relook at where the way you set up your HubSpot or Salesforce, because I can guarantee you some of these processes are broken. And I think that's one of the things that we realized as we were going through, people saying, "Oh, I need more leads. I need more top of funnel. We have to close more business." And
I
all of a
know what
sudden,
client you're talking about.
and all of a sudden you go through it and they have like, hundreds of leads stuck in Salesforce that workflows have been writing and rewriting over and over again. And so before you can fix that go to market, you have to reset the CRM process. And so that's the kind of stabilization pieces that you need to just look at. Like, are all the pieces and frameworks working together like you originally intended when you started putting out your go to market strategy?
So, said simply, do you have the right people in the right seat doing the right role? Do you have the proper ideal customer profile, the proper buyer persona, the proper value props? Are your systems, tools, and processes set up correctly and working properly? And do you have the proper tech stack, resources, etc., allocated to effectively run your business in a stable way that you are not chasing your tail at the end of every week, month, quarter?
And absolutely. And I think to get to these places, one of the other things that we put in place as an organization is like an audit. So a lot of times we just wanted to jump in as soon as we wanted to, but we have started to do a go to market audit that we do
That didn't
before
work
every
well.
client.
That didn't work well, did it?
No, no, we were just like jumping into the middle of things and realizing like we needed to take a step back because we didn't understand the business. So like we would get up to speed on the product, service, market, but these fundamental challenges with a process or a tech stack or right person, right seat was always a challenge.
So I want to talk about the audit for a second because this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I actually hate the word audit, but it's better than diagnostic. I think there's a lot of consultants out there, right? I talk about this on LinkedIn all the time. There's a lot of people who, respectfully to every founder listening, want to take your money, give you some document that was created 3 years ago, and tell you this is how you fix your go to market for $1,999. That shit doesn't work. But what I found specifically for us, we we talk about being operators and not consultants all the time. And what that means is that we are going to be all up in your business and we want to be all up in your business and we want to get to work as quickly as possible. It ties into our ethos of helping you extend your runway and decrease your burn. But by doing that without doing the audit first is doing a disservice to you as a client because we're coming in making assumptions based on the data you've told us, which, no offense, isn't necessarily correct because you're not a revenue leader. You don't know where to look in the closet. You don't know what skeletons to turn over, and you don't know all the questions to ask. The audit isn't 10 questions. memory serves me correctly, at last count, it's like 246, give or take, um, to really get deep. And I struggled with that at first of, I want to help and I want to help now and we got to get right to work. And I think it only took us one client of realizing that getting right to work without doing the audit isn't taking two steps forward. It's taking three steps forward and six steps back. So you're actually winding up behind the eight ball. You've got to take those, call it 3 weeks, to really understand what's happening, to put that plan together so that we can effectively serve you.
Yep, 100%. And that audit leads right into maybe you are really stabilized. We haven't seen that yet in our group, but maybe you're stabilized and you've kind of restructured things and you're going from SMB to enterprise and you've kind of done that initial jump and now you got to start building out the foundation. So the second step in the go to market gap is the foundation laying of everything, trying to do it at the right pace at the right time and getting the results. So getting feedback internally from the market, that foundation time is as like just like you build a house. You're not going to build it on a bad foundation. Why are we trying to build a go to market strategy, execution platform on a incorrect foundation? So that foundation stage is all about implementing, testing, and tasting the strategies, the messaging, that ICP we just
I mean, I'm
defined,
I'm
those
I'm
buying
I'm not
personas.
tasting any strategies or messaging, but we can implement a test. I'll taste some wine with you, but like I don't know about tasting strategies.
And that test and getting the data and the feedback, because you could be in that foundation area for a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months,
Easy, easy.
as you're getting the data, and we're like, this message is not working, this IP needs to be tweaked. We thought it was, 400 million in revenue, but it's really, a billion plus. Like there's a lot of different scenarios and pieces like that. We just need to tweak and build before you go start hiring five, six, seven sales reps, right? Like we've gotten into that motion before. Like, great, let's go get repeatable and scalable and go from like 2 reps to 6 reps. And like that can be a recipe for a disaster if you haven't done stabilization and foundation laying.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like we're blessed. We're incredibly blessed. I was talking with my wife about this the other day. I love what I do. I know you love what you do. I think it's a privilege anytime someone entrusts their company to us. But what I've realized is whether you are a well-funded seed stage startup or a $3.2 billion company or a $70 billion company, all of whom we've done work with, by the way, the problems are pretty universal and the approach is universal of bridge the GTM gap. And when you talk about building that foundation, I think a lot of folks don't understand, again, going back to stabilization and why you can't go one without the other. Why do you need that foundation and what happens when you don't have it? And we've seen it, right? We've seen everything crack. We've worked with the founder who, and I own this one all day long, wanted to hire 4 sales reps. It wasn't the right move. I said it wasn't the right move, and then I acquiesced when I shouldn't have, going back to our core principles of we cannot do this, and this is why. And I think part of this is what led to how we talk about the GTM gap. You have to have the foundation in place. If you don't have that foundation in place, it might not happen today, it might not happen tomorrow, but it is all going to come crumbling down. And part of that foundation is where you start to document everything. I have yet to find a company that we've worked with that, in my opinion, has things properly documented in any way, shape, or form. You might have a little bit of documentation, but you really don't have it to the point of where everything is easy to be found in a way that makes sense for anyone on any team throughout the company.
Yeah, and back to the documentation, I think most people think about onboarding. So as you're building that foundation, you're onboarding reps. We think about onboarding or an HR group inside some of the companies we work with think about onboarding as culture, like how we're going to onboard you into like the HR systems and everything like that. But what is missing is how you're going to onboard them as a go-to-market team, as you're going to onboard them into the sales process, as you're going to onboard them into mutual action plans and like what has been working for other people within the organization. And so that documentation needs to be an onboarding plan for how you're going to actually go from day one to whatever your ramp period is. It may be 30 days, it may be 60 days, depending on the size of the organization, the companies you're trying to execute on. But that part seems to be missing, which is part of that foundational piece. So if you don't have, for example, if you don't have a good onboarding for go to market, by definition, I believe you are actually in foundation building. You can't go to repeatability without passing that gate. So just like in sales processes, there's gates that you need to hit. You can't go into that without a good onboarding plan.
People buy from people. That's why companies who invest in meaningful connections win. The best part? Gifting doesn't have to be expensive to drive results, just thoughtful. Sendoso's intelligent gifting platform is designed to boost personalized engagement throughout the entire sales process. Trust me, I led sales for a Sendoso competitor, and I could tell you no one does gifting better than Sendoso. If you're looking for a proven way to win and retain more customers, visit sendoso.com. I was legitimately just going to say that as we're looking at bridging the GTM gap, you have entrance and exit criteria, right? Just like you do with sales stages. You can't get out of discovery until you do X. You can't get into case building until you do Y. You can't get into proposal until you do Z. You can't get into foundation until you do what in stabilization. You can't exit foundation until whatnot. You got to have the entry and exit criteria. And as a founder, you, and we will help you with this, have to hold yourself accountable to knowing what that criteria is and completing that criteria until you move along. I want to pivot away from go to market gap for a second. We're going to come back to it, but I want to talk just a little bit about some of the lessons we learned in helping to get from stabilization to foundation and why we have fundamentally shifted our business and the way that we do things to using a agile sprint methodology. That came because of the go to market gap, but I think this tie in of entry and exit criteria is really important. You are a product eng SE person by nature, so you are much more adept to this than I am. I was resistant to this for a long time, right? Like I remember the first customers we rolled it out with, and I was super transparent about being resistant to it. And now I can tell you, based on our feedback internally and customers' feedback, like I'm mad at myself that we waited a year to do this. I can't imagine ever doing it a different way. Um, what are your thoughts and what have you seen regarding the sprints and how does it benefit customers to make sure they're getting the most bang for their buck, whether they're engaging RR or frankly, if they're engaging someone else as well?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of this. I think when I always think about transparency, responsibility, and accountability, it's hard to kind of go at that week over week. And so we had things in big buckets. Like we're going to do, ICP and we're going to do sales process. And we had it in all these big buckets. And we never really assigned tasks to customers either through our Monday boards and the things that we were doing from a project management perspective. And then as we were talking to our clients, we do mutual action plans and joint engagement plans for the sales process. And once again, if you map that into the sprint process, there's things that we need to be able to accomplish, no matter how big or small, that may have implications that the customer needs to get us data. We may need a report. We may need access to HubSpot. We may need something from an audit perspective. And if we don't get that data, like we get stuck not being able to progress. But then at the end of, 2 or 3 weeks, they're like, well, why haven't we made any movement? Even though we made tons of movement, it's just that we got stuck in a place or two. So I think for me, the aha moment was being able to have the accountability and transparency back to the client and ensuring that our clients know that they need to do things for us to ensure that we're moving fast enough for them, that we're moving more efficiently. And that was the aha moment for me. And I've been super bad at Monday boards just because to me, in my mind,
I wasn't going to say anything. I
no,
really wasn't.
but in my mind, it's just like a big list of tasks, and it's almost like too big. Like it's not digestible for me. So I felt
Yeah.
as we are going through the sprint process, it was more digestible. We understood like what we were going to do in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and the customer knew what we were going to do in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and they had responsibility as much as we had responsibility. And so this is a team effort, and I think that was the aha moment for me.
And it's hard, right? Because every customer we onboard in the sales process, we get asked, how much of your time do I get? And like, I'm paying you a lot of money. Like, let's face it, we're probably in the top 5% of what we charge in our space. What are the deliverables I'm going to get? And while I would love to tell every customer the deliverable is going to be that, the needle is going to go up and to the right, listen, that's absolutely the goal, right? Is for the needle to go up and to the right. And not knock on pleather couch. We've delivered that for our customers. But with sprints, it's very clear to track the deliverables. These are the tasks, the projects, the targets, the milestones, insert next word here, that we need to hit. This is how we're progressing to them. This is the output, and this is the date in which you're going to get it by. And I also think from a customer client perspective, it helps with, well, wait a minute, you have whatever, task A, but task B is now really important. Okay, what do we want to sacrifice because task B is more important? And for me, when I challenge the founders that I'm taking lead on the project on, of, listen, we could absolutely do this, but we have to take something off. Well, it's suddenly not that important anymore, and it could wait till the next sprint. And that's okay. But what it causes you to do is everything isn't urgent and everything isn't a priority there. You really have to look at what's important and in what order. Again, stabilization, foundation, repeatability, scalability, all the time, every time.
Yeah, it's a super good point because the priorities shift even through the engagement, the first
Oh
month,
yeah.
the first 2 months. And we used to just like add on top of like, okay, we're just going to take on, we're just going to do. And from a
Manage
transparency,
the
like,
BDR team, sure. Manage marketing,
and,
no problem.
and we would like drop balls, right? And so like and it wasn't fair to us, it wasn't fair to the client, like, and so and there's a lot of stuff that we would do that wouldn't get put into a Monday boards, for example. So some things I've been doing is like trying to make sure as soon as I do something, I put it in the Monday board, thanks to like kind of like some coaching from you on it, because usually I'll wait too long or I'll forget about it, and it's like it feels like an administrative task, but it feels really good at the end of the 3 week sprint when we do like an analysis. Like here's all the things that we got done, or when you're going into your executive meeting on a weekly basis, here's a Monday board. This is our priority. Are we aligned? Does it meet your expectations? And like looking at those priorities and expectations on a frequent basis. And I always used to always say that when I was running a sales team and reporting to a CEO and saying, make sure that you're identifying and driving the expectations early and often. And that this just was a forcing mechanism for us, the sprint process.
100%. So, Dale, now we've stabilized, we've built the foundation. Next comes repeatability. And this is where so many people want to get, and they want to get there so fast. I don't want to say how long does it take to get to repeatability, because I think it varies widely. But said in an easier way, in order to really start to build out a repeatable go to market motion, what are some of the fundamental, like, this must be completed first before we could even think repeatability?
Yeah, I like to look at it depending on how big your sales team is. Are you closing business on a fairly regular basis with a process that is getting good feedback from your internally, from your customers, and transitioning into like a customer success? Like what's that handoff to customer success? Because we can put as much good revenue into the top of the funnel, but are we losing it in the back of the funnel? So though all of those
Ooh,
processes kind of need to be put in place, handoff from marketing into sales, sales in customer success. I was just talking to a client today on the two biggest gaps I always seen forever between marketing and sales. There's a huge gap or
yep.
a trench in between sales and customer success. And the more we can like make sure that that's a smooth process, Now you can create the repeatability around that process. So I say you get enough wins, call it 10 wins, 5, 10 wins within the current process that you're building, like those micro tuning that you're doing in the foundation process. Once you have that and you feel confident that you could take a sales executive, for example, and you're like, if I go hire a new sales executive and I give them $1 million quota, I can expect $3 million in return. Like when you get to that place, then you can start getting into repeatability and hiring multiple sales reps.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And then there's a couple other things that I think are really important, right? Of those deals that you're selling, do all these customers look alike? In early days, right? Like we're selling to all different customers. The value prop is pretty different. Some people might be paying $10. Some people might be paying $30. Some people might be paying $100. Are you selling the same product, the same customers at the same price point? Number one. Number two, and this is one that I like to hone in on, are they actually fucking using it? Like at the end of the day, no one wants to be shelfware. And unfortunately, for that first year, you oftentimes don't know if you are or not until it's renewal time. And the way you get ahead of that is you check usage. You got to talk to your customers. Founders, you got to talk to your customers and make sure that they're getting a value exchange for your product. Otherwise, you're going to have a big problem come renewal time. What does usage look like?
Yeah, I always like to say, sales, as difficult as we t say it always is, we always promise to deliver value, and then we like hand it over to success or implementation, and they have to actually deliver the value that we actually talked about. And so I think it's really important for that value exchange, that value conversation, that value prop to be measured and on a monthly, weekly, annual basis, however you're going to measure it, that the customer knows come renewal time, like they've gotten value, they couldn't live without you, and then they would expand or grow with you. So once we build that repeatability, and I think it's not only in the sales motion, but it's in marketing, for example. So now we're getting leads coming
100%.
in. We're potentially starting doing outbound, and outbound starting to generate meetings, and you have your kind of your engine running, and on a forecasting level, you can within a tolerance of plus or minus X%, you're hitting your targets on 2 quarter basis. You know, potentially it's ready to be scaled. Like where you're going to go on the scale side. So what are some of the things you think about when we go into that scaling motion?
I think it's arguably the most difficult of all the stages. Scalability is hard, right? Like now you are looking at things like capacity planning. Like what does that look like? When we get to what milestones are we hiring more? How do we broaden this out to beyond the team? What additional products and revenue streams do we want? How do we further solidify that handoff? And part of this takes place arguably in every stage, but between sales to marketing, marketing to success. What does NRR look like? What does gross logo retention look like? There's so many more things that come into play with scalability that I don't think people realize. And this is when, as a founder, what role are you taking within the company, right? I think your role fundamentally changes as you bridge the go to market gap. And I think the biggest and largest change is when you go into scalability, because now you are in that different role, right? You likely still doing a little bit of fundraising, but you aren't involved in really founder-led sales anymore. Certainly, you're starting to get out of it at repeatability, but certainly at scalability, like it's just not likely. And now all the shit that you used to do that wasn't scalable, the one-offs, you can't do anymore. And it's going to sound like I'm going back to foundation, but what is documented? It can't be scalable if it's not documented. It can't be scalable if it's not repeatable. It can't be scalable if it doesn't work on a broad, wide spectrum at a cost that makes sense across the board.
Yeah, and I'll just add one other piece. I think when you get to scalability, the founder or the revenue leader or the CEO of the organization should be really thinking on a day-to-day basis, like how do they put themselves out of business? And
Mm,
as they're trying to figure out how they're going to put themselves out of business, they go to a different market segment or they're putting in a new product. Well, guess what? Once you put in that new market segment or that new product, like you're right back to stabilization for that business unit, for that group. Like you can't, if you're in a mid market and now as you go to scale and drive more revenue, you want to go into the enterprise market. Like you can't take all those playbooks that you built. You may have to build a new team. You may have to build like new playbooks, new messaging, new everything. So you're back at like stabilization. So as you're going into scalability and you're thinking about how you're growing and scaling, some of the output of the scalability phase may be another set of stabilization through foundation and repeatability. So it becomes this evolution through the process. And so here's the bad news is like it never ends. Here's the good news is like you're always changing. And so
Yeah,
that evolution is super important for a business.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a year. We have coined the go-to-market gap. We have helped 15 some odd clients scale their revenues, uh, upwards of many tens of millions of dollars. We have helped to reduce churn across our clients. We have brought new products to market. We have onboarded some incredible partners. It's been a really good year for me personally, bigger than I ever would have imagined. We brought a new partner into the business. There's a lot that's happened this year. What's the one thing that surprised you about working with me over the course of a year?
Um,
This is not a scripted question, by the way. He did not
yeah,
know this was coming.
yeah. For me, understanding um, my deficiencies in the operational structure of the business. So things that
Hmm.
I really am not good at, like the operational side, the tracking pieces, the Monday boards, the invoicing, like all the stuff that
Being
I
your
definitely,
secretary.
well, I was trying not to go
I
down
could
that
say it about
path.
myself.
I was trying not to go down that path, but it's
That's
just
okay.
like trying to figure out, like, because our philosophies are the same, but our
Yeah.
differences in operational execution are different. And so I think for me, that's the biggest thing that I've learned through this process is like my inabilities on things that I'm not good at that you totally take up. And the same thing with Jake, like some of the things that I'm not good at that Jake like takes on and blends through. So yeah, that would be my answer. And so question right back at you.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna flip it back. I thought I did. I thought I knew how to disconnect and focus on my family. And like listen, I'm a great dad. I'm a great husband. I will absolutely pat myself on the back. But I didn't realize how important it was, like on the weekends, unless there's a pending like an urgent thing, to like truly disconnect, like to really like not answer text messages, not answer phone calls. Like nothing's more important than family. The other thing, I think that you do a really good job of asking a lot more questions. I thought I was good with tell me more. You get so many layers deep on our customer calls, and like I'll make fun of you for like doing this, but like you do, you ask the right questions, and you've challenged me to take a more analytical approach. I think, and we've talked about this before, our personalities balance one another, right? I am definitely the loud, stereotypical, boisterous sales leader in that sense. And I tend to talk a little more off the cuff. You tend to take a much more measured, let me sleep on it, let me think about it approach. And it's been really good for me to start to do that. As we wrap it up, and we're not going to do rapid fire because that would just be fucking awkward. But I do have some questions as we've been sitting here that have come to mind. What is one thing that I don't know about you?
I don't know if you know this or don't know this about me. I say it once in a while when I'm kind of like introducing myself, but most of the people wouldn't know that I actually tried out for The Apprentice back
I did not
in.
know that.
I tried out for I think it was like season two
And
or
you look
something
like
like
Bill.
that.
You look a little like Bill Rancic.
I think it was like season two, and I remember going through like it was like a big round table piece, and then I had to do like a video piece in the hotel, and like went through this whole process. And so that was very interesting and something that I don't really, it doesn't come up a lot, but it's something that I did. How about you? What's one thing
That's
I
fun.
don't know about you?
I'm trying to, I don't know if I told you this or not. And if I did, we'll edit this and pop something new in. But when I was 21, for 3 years, my lifelong dream, at that age was to be a cop. I was actually a cop for almost 5 years. I don't know if I've ever talked about that with you or not. I don't typically talk about it often. I hated it. It was miserable. I thought that it was going to be so much fun, and it was a lot of like waving hands and like community policing and making, I think I made like $31,000, and started dating a girl in pharmaceuticals who worked what we then called T2T, Tuesday to Thursday, 10 to 2, and made like 5 times the amount of money I made. And I hated it. And I look back and I'm like, why did I want to do that? So yeah, little fun fact. Did you know that?
One
Did we
last
talk
one.
about that?
Uh, I don't know if I knew the whole story. I think I hear it once in a while, but I didn't know the whole story on it.
Hmm.
What's as we wrap this up, what do you want to see from RR in 2025?
Oh, that is a great question. I feel like we talk about this a lot, but we don't talk about this enough. Um, I want to help as many founders as I possibly can, of course, decrease their burn and increase their runway. But to me, what I would really like to see is the RR branded, systematized way of how exactly do you bridge the go to market gap every single time, consistently across the board. Now, listen, all of our playbooks are custom. They always will be. They'll always be bespoke. But there's certain things that come across. I want to be that when people think of I'm struggling with go to market, there's so much noise out there that we break through that noise and we deliver such exceptional results for our clients that there is no one else that gets thought of.
Love that. Love that. Awesome.
What about you, Dale?
I'd like to get
Dale
deeper
wants to
into
see vacation. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
no, the deeper. I want to get deeper into the AI world and
Ooh,
um, how we can take a lot of the frameworks that we built out and bring it to a wider audience. I think a lot of times we can't take on all the customers we want to take on just because bandwidth and challenges that we have with bandwidth. So one of the goals I'd like to see for the company in the 2025 is how can we take some of that stuff, leverage some of the great things within AI platforms. Um, we're working on a couple of things, hint on how that could potentially be executed, and looking forward to seeing can we democratize some of this AI platform, go to market, repeatability stuff that people can start with as a template framework, and then if they get stuck can come to us, but like be a resource for people that may not be able to afford like a full engagement but could afford downloading templates, looking at how they're going to work through the templates, and then execute on those templates.
I love it. So with that, stay tuned because there are a lot of exciting things coming in the next couple of months prior to 2025 for Revenue Reimagined for the overall go-to-market space. We have a brand new website that's going to be launching in the next couple of months. We have dozens and dozens of templates and frameworks that we are going to share with you for free, ungated. Download them, use them. We are very big believers of give to get. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for updates to the podcast. You've started to see a little shift in format, but we're going to start providing a ton more value. Stay tuned for productization. Dale's working on some super exciting AI things. We're not becoming a SaaS company, but we are going to productize a little bit and give you all access to things that will help make your lives easier at a price point that is accessible to everyone, and then mostly community. Keep looking for us. We will be out. We will be about. We will be at events. Catch us on the podcast. Catch us on LinkedIn. But most importantly, please share your feedback. If there's something that you feel is plaguing you in go to market, something that you feel needs to be addressed that isn't being addressed amongst the echo chamber that is LinkedIn, drop us a note. Adam at Dale at Jake at revenue-reimagined.com. I'm still trying to get that rr.com email address. It is very expensive, but I am bound and determined. But thank you to our wonderful guest, Dale. No, I'm kidding, who joined us today. But we don't get to do these often. It's sometimes nice to just sit back and chat about the business a little bit. But most importantly, thanks everyone for your support. The amount of support that we see consistently from those we work with and those that want to work with us and just those in the community. That's what keeps us going. So grateful to all of you.
Thank you.